Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Primer Encuentro Relief. We are honored and glad to present Dr. Marianne Mittum from the University of California. Dr. Marianne Mittum is a prominent figure in the linguistics field. She carries on her research work on linguistics typology, language contact and language change, and relations among prosody, syntax, and discourse. She has worked with several languages from the Iroquoian, the Pomoan, the Chumash, the Eskimo Aleut, the Siouan, the Austronesian, and the Athabascan linguistic families. Some of her most important publications are The Language of Native North America and Attic Adjective, Case Marking and its Motivations. We want to thank you, Marianne, for giving you your insights about linguistics. Well, the first question was, which topics do you consider should be investigated in the next 10 years?
I think that's a wonderful question, and I think it's really great that you've got people from different areas of linguistics, so you'll get different answers from everybody, because of course we think about what we do and the people we talk to the most often. So I completely expect you'll get a nice wide range of answers. From my point of view, I think the most important things that can be done in the next 10 years are really establishing a rich empirical basis for our work. And at the moment, we really, I just can't emphasize enough, it's really important to document as many languages in depth. And that means not just saying, how do you say? It means letting people talk. And especially, you know, a variety of genres, let them say what they want to say, how they say it, and especially a lot of conversation. Because of course that will give us, you know, a firm foundation. We'll know what's really true, but also we don't know what all the questions are going to be in 10 years. I mean, right now there's this hot topic and that hot topic. In 10 years, we don't know what the hot topic is going to be. If we have really good documentation, we can look at the documentation to see those kinds of answers. And of course, in Argentina, you have this wealth of indigenous languages. And you know, a variety of different families. I mean, so it's not like you do one and you've figured it all out. And now it's so much more possible to do good documentation than it was even a short while ago. I mean, we can even record on Zoom. You know, of course, you have to have the right people that you're recording, but we can do good recordings, and that means that now when we're looking at some piece of language, we've got context, so we can see, you know, what was it that led somebody to use this construction. We've got nice ways of handling prosody, so you know, you hit a few buttons and you can see a pitch trace and you can see pauses and intensity. A short while ago, that wasn't like it. You had to say, well, it sort of sounds like, we don't do that anymore. We've got the real thing. So it's possible to do really good work. And this is the kind of thing I think is going to be really important, especially as we sort of go down the line, starting to look more and more at what languages are like, but also why. Something too, and you know very well, these indigenous languages are really threatened all over the world. And we think, okay, you know, we've got it until the last speaker is gone. But in fact, we lose a lot every day just because really good speakers are going. And of course, we have this special situation where people are bilingual or multilingual, and that's a good thing, but it also means that sort of the language is a moving target. And if we really want to sort of get into the depths of what this language, you know, really was over millennia, we really want good speakers who have that as a primary language. So to my mind, that's really a big priority. We're not going to be able to do that. I mean, Argentina is like that too, but here it's even worse. I mean, every week we lose important speakers, and that's not something we can replace. So we've got the technology now, but we want to really take advantage of those speakers.
I have a question, if I may.
Yeah.
Do you think that maybe initiatives like the International Year of Indigenous Languages are helpful for this issue? Are they being helpful right now, or what do you expect from universities or states to help with this issue?
Thank you. I think that's a really important question. And I don't know about the situation in Argentina. You guys have better insight into that. I think one way it might help is giving respect to work with indigenous languages. So for a long time, for example, in a lot of academic settings, if you were, I mean, we all know that documentation takes a lot of time. I mean, if you're doing it right, you're spending a lot of time listening, transcribing, writing, and doing all this stuff. I myself find that that's like one of the best possible things to make you a good linguist. I mean, you think it's kind of dumb work. Oh, here I am transcribing and translating again and putting my words into classes and stuff like that. But actually, it gives you a sense of the language that you can't get any other way. And for a long time, a lot of departments didn't think that was really intellectual work. So you were only intellectual if you had, you know, the latest readjustment of a theoretical model, and you could say, no, this branch goes over here, it doesn't go over here. And I think that's a really astute question. So we'd like, I think this is actually true, that at least the departments I know now respect documentation work more, and more importantly, granting agencies do. So I mean, and that's huge. Interesting question about whether it makes any difference to communities themselves. You know, it does, in the sense that if it makes funding available to them for documentation, then that can be really important. But yeah, I don't know what it's like in Argentina. I don't know.
Juan is working not in Argentina, right, Juan? You're working with a Paraguayan language?
Yes, I'm working with the Ache people, Native American people from Eastern Paraguay, and they indeed are losing their language. They nowadays are speaking Guarache, that is a language which mixes Ache, their native language, with Guarani, that in Paraguay is a national language, no?
Yeah.
And yes, the elder people are the only ones who can talk Ache, and well, they are slowly dying, and the young generations don't speak the language no more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have like a strong tradition from many linguists here that have been researching indigenous languages for many, many years. But I kind of agree with you in the sense that in the last couple of years, or in the last 10 years, I have been like witness of a change in the perception of the discipline and the work of the linguist. So I hope that this change, this really interesting idea behind, linguists who are doing, who are researching indigenous languages are doing a great thing. Let's keep track of them, and let's continue studying their work. I think that will become something like more enlightening and more interesting in the couple of years that are going in the future. So I kind of agree with you. But of course, I don't know if there are many grants and stuff related to that field, because I don't work in that field, but I do feel that there is more respect than ever.
That's a good thing. I can say a little bit more too about spending your time doing this. I myself think that the most interesting linguistics comes out of people who've been really deeply entrenched in language data. So like I think the very best interesting typology or linguistic theory comes from people being immersed in what people are doing and saying, oh, that's interesting. And then you've got something to say rather than top down saying, okay, I'm just going to look at how relative clauses work across the world. I mean, that's okay. But I think at this point, coming up out of the bottom is actually more useful. It also means if you've been working, putting your time in with documentation, and then you look at, you know, scholarly meetings, all the time you'll see, oh, there's a call, we're gonna have a festival on antipassives. And you could say, whoa, I've got antipassives, I have something to say. So very often it gives you a sort of, in a sense, a theoretical advantage too, so.
But another question is, which are for you the trending topics in the area?
Okay, and I think this is going to be an interesting thing for, you're going to get different answers from everybody. So I think that's really interesting. Obviously, a big thing is their new tools. So now there are new tools for corpus construction, and as I was saying, new tools for analyzing sound and other properties of speech. So this gives us a great big sort of advantage. And when we have big amounts of data, we can really see things happening, and we can start to think about explanations and stuff like that. I would think that just myself, I mean, again, we all have our view, our little corner of the world, and I fully recognize that. I think trending topics are figuring out not just what languages do, but how come, and so starting to explain things. And part of that is having this kind of nuanced view of language. So rather than just saying, okay, this language has head final, head initial, or you know, head internal relative clauses, the end. If you really get to know a language well, you can say, oh yes, I can see this construction just beginning to emerge, but it's very rare and we can still see where it's coming from. So for me, and this is just maybe a personal thing, I think if we want to explain things, we really need a diachronic view. So there's some things we can explain synchronically. We can say, yeah, sure, you know, heavy noun phrases come at the end because people can't remember things if you put them at the beginning. Okay, that's a kind of a moment for me. But so much of grammar we just learn, and it gets formed little by little in tiny steps over time. And I think we're beginning to appreciate that. So I think adding the diachronic dimension is really a crucial thing for explanation. It's just my view. Other people will tell you very different things, and that's important too.
And which are the great milestones in the discipline in the last 20 years for you?
Well, I think one thing is we're knowing a lot more about a lot more languages, which is really, really good. I would like to think that there's a lot of progress in how to document languages. So, you know, in the bad old days, you figured out what the phonemes were, and that was important. Obviously, you need that. And here are the allophones. And maybe you figured out the basic morphology, and that was good. Okay. Now, I think as more and more people are coming out with interesting things they're finding in their languages, it means people can go back and say, oh, I'm going to try that, or, oh, I hadn't thought about looking for this, or I'm going to watch for that. So I think that's really, really good. People are looking at we've got sort of wide typological work, and so there are more possibilities out there, and you can sort of read a work on the typology of something and say, okay, have I figured it out for this language? People are looking at correlations and trying to see whether this gives you explanation or not. So if all the languages I see that do this also do this, what does that mean? And there's several possibilities. One is, okay, there's a deeper intellectual principle here, and speakers have, you know, deep intellectual principles, possibility. Another is, well, yeah, because these things always developed from those things. So when you see the two there, that's a historical trajectory. Okay, so there's that kind of stuff going on. Oh, I'd say another big milestone is that there's finally respect for language contact and the power of language contact. And by that I mean, you know, especially when, you know, there are two languages in a head. The question is, what does that do to each of the languages? And for a long time, you know, contact was just kind of put aside, and maybe, oh yeah, if we've got, you know, we've got irregularities, we'll just, you know, it's maybe just contact, don't worry about it. But now, I mean, most people in the world are multilingual, except for Americans, as you probably know. You know that joke, what do you call somebody who's bilingual? No, who knows two languages? You say bilingual. How about somebody who knows 3 languages? Trilingual. How about somebody who knows just 1 language? American. Which is terrible. But back to language contact. So much of what language is like is in part a function of what languages are coexisting in people's heads. And that's getting more respect, and it's explaining a lot. So we have these kind of large aerial groupings, and we see, oh yeah, all through the Amazon, you know, we've got this, but gosh darn, it's not anywhere else. So we're learning more about what that means. Until fairly recently too, for documentation, there was an idea that you had to be pure and you couldn't have any borrowing in your documentation. So you got to make sure it's pure or something or other. And people felt terribly guilty, you know, if they said a word that wasn't there or whatever. Now we realize that being multilingual is a strength, and it's something to be respected. And we can see, we're starting to learn about the deep kinds of things that can be affected by language contact. So way back in the bad old days, people thought, yeah, vocabulary, and it's not even important. And now we're seeing that very often you have very profound contact effects in grammar. So I work with California languages, among other things. Especially, yeah, there are a lot of languages in California. You probably know this. Nobody even knows how many. Huge number. So there are over 20 distinct genetic families of indigenous languages in California. You had no idea. Yeah, so a lot of that. And for a while in the early 1900s, people were, see, contact, as you know, sort of California was settled later than the East. And so documentation of California languages is much more recent. Very unfortunately, a lot of times the first contact was totally destructive for communities. And so there are communities we know about where the language was never documented just because disease did things beforehand. But anyway, so in the early 1900s, a guy named Alfred Kroeber, who was a student of Boas, was hired at the University of California, Berkeley, to form the anthropology department. And he kind of looked around and said, gee, there are all these languages, we better send people out to start documenting them. And so he sent everybody out, whether they knew much linguistics or not. And it was very fortunate because there's a lot we know about languages only because of these people he sent out. And then in the very early, like 1903, they kind of noticed, yeah, you know, there are a lot of things these languages kind of have in common that we wouldn't have expected, a lot of the languages. And then in 1913, they said, hey, maybe it's because they're deeply related genetically. And this was kind of springing like crazy. So somebody said, okay, all of these are related. And then somebody said, hey, and all of these are related. And then somebody said, hey, I see something in this one that's like that one. So all of those must be related. So we got these giant genetic groupings all the way down into Mexico and up through British Columbia on the basis of like 2, 3, 5 things. Okay. Yeah, or these are related, evidence to follow, but the evidence never followed. anyway, now we know a lot more about this situation because these almost all communities in California, not all, but almost all of them have always been very small because California is a great place to live. You know, you don't have to chase buffalo and you don't have to have a whole lot of agriculture. You just dip your hand in the water and you eat your seafood, or you know, it's a great place to live. Anyway, that meant that you could have small communities. Okay, and when you have small communities, people marry somebody from another community. So you had a lot of exogamy, okay? And so that meant that a lot of kids grew up from the beginning as multilingual, okay? Now, what's very interesting, there was also this cultural idea that you speak the language where you are. So if I visit you, I speak your language, you visit me, you speak my language, okay? And there was also this idea, you don't really want to mix languages, okay? Keep the language, which meant that you see very little borrowed vocabulary. I mean, there's, you know, more recent Spanish stuff, but, and a few words, like the word for dog kind of, but otherwise, very, very little vocabulary. But there are tremendous structural parallelisms. And that's, you know, so you have very elaborate grammatical distinctions for certain things. For example, throughout California, all these languages, you have very delicate, fine distinctions of direction and location. So you don't ever just say, I went, you say, you know, I went going downhill, or I went going across water. And these are little bitty things, which means they've been in the language for a long, long time. They're often just like a little consonant or something like that. And they're not the same across the languages, okay? So they're not cognates. But what this means is, if I'm speaking this language and people are very careful about specifying direction and location, then I go over here and I'm speaking a totally unrelated language, I'm likely to want to keep specifying direction and location. But I know I'm not supposed to borrow things, so I use tools in this other language to do that. And over a very, very long time, you end up getting sort of parallel grammaticalization. So you start out with kind of parallel discourse, but over millennia, centuries, millennia, you get this parallel grammaticalization. So you get grammatical categories that make the same elaborate distinctions, but they don't look anything alike. Okay, so and I mean, that's only a little piece. Huge numbers of things are very, very similar. So we're realizing that grammar can really be shaped greatly by contact, depending on the situation. And the shaping depends a whole lot on the nature of the bilingualism. So kids can learn anything, you know, no limits on memory. They got it all there. So if you have child, you know, full native bilingualism, you're very likely to get added complexity. If, on the other hand, you've got adults coming in and learning this language as a second language late in life, they tend to simplify things. Okay. I mean, we all know there's all these choices, you go for the simple one, right? And of course, people weren't learning these things in universities or anything. So we're learning a lot more about kind of the potentially profound effects on shaping language that contact can have. Okay, that's more than you wanted to know.
Oh, yes, and this shows you the importance of the diachronic studies that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Well, another question is, what advice would you give to someone who is starting out on the linguistic research?
Well, I would say, and everybody will give you a different answer, and I think that's fine. From my point of view, somebody actually told me this. This was a Greenlander, a speaker of Greenlandic, and I was a young student, and we got to be good friends. He's really great. I mean, he's a Greenlander, and he was going into linguistics to work with his language. He said, you know, your linguistics will be very different if you know some language in depth. And he was really right. So I would say whatever you want to do, if you spend a lot of time getting to know a language, either documenting it yourself or even just getting immersed in textual stuff. So not just reading a grammar where they say, yeah, there's 5 past tenses, here they are, and there are, 6 person markers, here they are. That's one thing. If you really go into depth and get a sense of how people use this language and what it is, I think you're a different kind of linguist. Yeah. So my advice would be, whatever you end up doing, get to know something really, really well. And of course, if you're documenting it, then that's a great service to everybody else too. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and last but not least, what are for you the contributions of a linguist to society?
Okay, I think you all have good things to say. It depends what society, of course. So sort of the close one is that linguists can really do important things for communities with threatened languages, or even minority languages that aren't threatened, because for so long there hasn't been any respect for these languages. And so people were ashamed to use them or didn't believe in them. And I think linguists can show how beautiful and intricate and important they are and valued they are. And in my experience, this has had a huge effect on, I've got to tell you, this is something that I absolutely treasure. So I worked with Mohawk since I was a student, and that was quite a long time ago. And a bunch of us were standing around drinking coffee, Mohawks. And this was like not so long ago. So after, and these were people who I started working with. They were very good speakers. And this is a wonderful community. And they said, you know what turned this community around? It's a wonderful community. And I said, what? She said, morphology. Wow. This never happens in real life. This doesn't happen to everybody, but these were really, really good speakers, but they hadn't spent time reading or writing. They didn't go to high school and stuff, so their use of this language was exquisite, but they'd never thought about it. It was fully unconscious. And these were all people who were going to start teaching the language in the school. So they had no idea what to do. They said, do we just go in and teach people animal names or something? And you say, well, no, that doesn't make people speakers. So they asked me to come in and sort of show them how the language works. So Mohawk has very elaborate morphology. It's exquisite, really complex morphology. You can't imagine. And they had no idea. But so over the years, we just pulled it out and they saw this and they were just astonished. What kind of minds can create this magnificent structure and use it? And I showed them, it's not just that you've got these, you shove the words together. It's that anytime you have a morphological way of doing something, you also have a lexical way of doing something. And it's not an accident what they do. So for example, you bring a new concept in with a big fat word or a whole clause, and then once it's established, you tuck it into your verb. And so all of this has to do with what the speaker wants to put your attention at. And so, yeah, and so these communities are just, they're so proud of what they have, and they have every reason to be. Another little piece of an anecdote is that, so when I first was asked to come, they sort of woke up one morning and noticed the kids didn't speak the language. It was like it happened overnight. And so they said, we gotta teach this language. And then they tried, and then it didn't work. And so then I came in and we figured out, how to teach it. So the kids were just learning to talk, not, memorizing vocabulary. Anyway, and ultimately this community and there's 6 Mohawk communities. They're absolutely amazing. They instigated immersion programs. So when kids are 3 or 4, decide whether they're going to do all of their learning in Mohawk or English with a little bit of Mohawk class. The kids in the Mohawk stream have been tested like crazy by the Quebec government. The kids in the Mohawk stream do in every single subject than the kids in the English stream, including in English, which is really, really nice. But these teachers said something else, which is really interesting to me. They said the kids in the Mohawk stream, it was like a revolution. No matter how well they spoke the language, some kids are better than others, they were changed people because they knew who they were. They had respect for who they were. And that was new. So I have a good friend, she was a teacher and then a principal at school. She said when she first went, before they did this, there was a problem of what they call lateral violence, that is kids beating up on each other. She said that disappeared, which is really, really nice. These communities are absolutely astonishing communities. They're the kind of communities I think everybody wished they belonged to. They're really, really amazing. So that's one thing that linguistics can do for communities. I think sort of on a larger scale, maybe having really good linguistics out there and sort of celebrating the complexity and the specialness of each language can give people a deeper understanding of their place in the world. I mean, there's still a lot of people who think, okay, well, maybe not so much there, but here, you know, people who think, okay, if you speak English, you're smart, and if you speak anything else, you're just not as smart as I am because it's all measured by English. It would be really nice if people understood how diverse the possibilities are, and how rich the possibilities are. So like other languages aren't just bad English, you know, there's all of this cultural and intellectual richness behind them. And of course, if we want to do that, we have to have really good documentation and description. So not just here's the verb paradigm, the end. You want to really see what people do with their language and how different that can be. Like, you know, there's more than one way to think. I think that's an important thing. Of course, on the other side, and you'll probably hear more about this from people who are in this, linguists now have huge technological contributions. I mean, with speech recognition, with managing huge amounts of data, with creating bots, you know, machine analysis of large bodies of text. So there's that other complete side, which is like a big piece of our world now. So those are just some of my thoughts. I don't know.
Yes, I think we'll agree here too. There are people who think that speaking Spanish or English or French is very important, but they discriminate the Indian people when they speak bad
Yeah.
Spanish, or criticize them because they want to speak in their own language.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think you answered all of our questions. There were many. Is there any final comment or words that you want to say?
Well, I guess one thing would be if I mean, you see that I really believe in documentation. If you're doing documentation, really stand back and let speakers speak. So don't just check off typological boxes. It's very easy to do that. Don't just stop with having people translate Spanish into the language or English into the language. It's very easy to do that. And of course, you do that to start out with. I mean, when I'm starting with a brand new language, I'm going to do simple stuff. I'm going to say, you know, would you please count slowly from 1 to 10? And there I am wondering what sounds are going to come out, you know, and oh, okay, got that. And there's a reason to start like that, because the poor speaker, if they're a really good speaker, they think, oh no, I'm not going to be good enough. I never learned this in school. I have no idea how to do this. So you want to do something that puts them at ease. And so of course you start slow. And you get to the point where you think you can kind of transcribe things somewhat. But as soon as possible, you want to let speakers shape the record of their language. So yeah, I guess that's what I'd like to say. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Maria, for participating in our humble Primer Encuentro Relief. I want to thank you.
Marianne, it was such an incredible talk. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm so impressed with what you're doing. It's really wonderful. Keep it up.